What's going on, everybody? It's Frito here for ClickHeads. Big patch day. We covered that in a separate video, breaking down all the changes and when the patch comes out. Check that video out for that information. This one, we're going to be catching you up on all the recent news, as well as some pretty big leaks and information that wasn't included in the patch. Rounding up a lot of other interesting odds and ends, Morello again had another Q&A, as well as an interview with HITSCAN, and we'll catch you up on the meta discussions and philosophy of that later in the video. First up, game director Riot Ziegler announced to Twitter that they are currently evaluating the stability of any issues with the patch as it goes live across the world. Based on what we see, they will turn on competitive mode tomorrow after all regions have the patch, or later this week. We'll update you later today. So the info on this keeps changing. It seems optimistically, if everything's working, they'll turn on ranked for everybody at the same time tomorrow, or if they have more bugs to work out with the patch, they'll enable it later this week. Other news for you, moving on to the leaks. Everybody's favorite Valorant data miner, Floaxy, has found quite a few things that he posted to his Twitter, showing an image of some beta skins that he seems to be implying are coming back, a new skin collection called the Convex skins, which look to have sort of a army green to them, and as well a triplet of very interesting finds. A report when someone that you identify as a cheater has been banned, a loyalty XP boost, and a tournament mode, which is something that I think they've kind of been hinting at would be a thing. I'll note that there's no context to these tweets at all, so that doesn't mean these things are definitely in this patch, but instead perhaps are things that he's finding traces of and is leaking out that are things that Riot are working on. Seeing as Riot likes to announce things in the patch notes clearly before it comes out, I don't think we're gonna have any surprises. However, be on the lookout for these additions to be things that they're working on and potentially could be coming in future patches. Next up in the news, as you guys know, there's been quite a discussion over the cosmetic systems in Valorant. I know many of you weren't too thrilled at the sort of minimal response Riot had in their Q&A, but this interview on Forbes clarifies further Riot's opinions on what is deemed as one of the more forgivable aspects of the CSGO economy, skin trading, where yes, a lot of the skins have crazy high prices, but because they have tangible value and can be transferred and traded, or even just sold for Steam bucks to buy games with, you can trick yourself into thinking it makes more sense to pay hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands for some pixels on a screen. I joke, I pay far too much for skins too. I'm not judging anyone. But Joe Lee, revenue lead of Valorant, gave a few choice quotes to Forbes to indicate further their feelings on this discussion, saying explicitly that skin trading works in other game economies when the only method of acquiring content is through loot boxes, as in the paid RNG system CSGO has. Drop rates and loot box supply can be tuned by the developer, which then impacts the supply and demand of the product. For us, we primarily support a direct purchase store model, meaning if you see something you want, we want you to be able to consider that product and purchase it as a known quantity. No randomness, no considerations for aftermarket speculation. If you like it, we hope you'll consider it worthwhile. If you don't, we would love to hear that so that we can improve our content. He goes on to say skins in Valorant are designed to be meaningful representations of a player, whether they want to say I was there using an exclusive skin from an early battle pass, or they've managed to get a time limited skin from the store. Having a secondary market introduces a lot of complexity around what a skin means in game, and oftentimes just makes it about who has the most expensive one. As we've reported in previous news videos, Lee also goes on to say that they're trying to improve the battle pass, so there's more things to do with Radiant Knight to make sure it has its value, but overall says that they are currently happy with the value offerings we have across the skin gun bundles, the rotating store, and the battle pass. So for the most part here, other than the explicitly stated improvements to the battle pass, a lot of the criticisms are falling on deaf ears from Riot. And my question with all this is, how many of these big skin bundles are they going to make? Because people eventually, you'd think, are going to stop paying $70 for each one. Is there going to be some maniac out there that every few weeks buys all of them? It's going to quickly start racking up into the thousands, which yes, is how much people spend into CSGO skins, so maybe it makes sense, but it also is kind of crazy at the same time. Personally, as I've put more time into the game and unlocked more of the battle pass, I feel a little bit better about how it all is working out. The battle pass skins are good, not amazing, but are good enough for me. And since I play on multiple accounts, I have different cosmetics on them, and I don't feel the overwhelming pressure to buy all the premium stuff, maybe just select ones I want. And so as long as they buff up that battle pass to make it a little bit more engaging, I'm a bit more on board on the direction they're going. Now, next up, I wanted to break down the comments Riot Morello has been making, again, on his personal live stream. He's always doing Q&As over there, so if you want to catch him live, check the link in the description. Maybe you can ask him a question and get it answered. But as well, we want to go further in depth in the second part of Morello's interview with HITSCAN. In both cases here, I'm going to be combining the information and summarizing the different elements of the game that were discussed. A few rapid fire announcements to bring up first. There will be individual key bindings for agents eventually. No ETA on that. Morello gets asked about glove cosmetics, which is a thing they added to CSGO. And although he doesn't explicitly answer yes, he does heavily hint that character cosmetics need to be able to work in first person. That's key because, as we've said in other cases in relation to the agent skins, Valorant doesn't have a wealth of options to show off your character in third person. There's no emotes, etc. So you do really need to be able to get the impact of the skin in first person as well. So I'd say that's almost a given that either the gloves themselves or any agent skins would make modifications. One suggestion I have is that in Overwatch, in the lower left corner, there is a player portrait that changes depending on what skin you have. Maybe there isn't any screen real estate to utilize that with Valorant, but things like that anyway can add some extra value to skins when you're in first person. As always, Morello gets asked about new agent additions and has a lot of interesting comments about this. A few examples of things that he seemed optimistic towards the idea of, just in general. Doesn't mean any of this is coming necessarily, but Morello was asked if they would introduce an agent that could build ropes or other terrain similar to the ropes we have in the map Split. Interesting answer. He said that they did develop the tech to be able to do that, although they don't have an agent per se. It was more so as they were building the game and sort of the infrastructure, I assume, of the engine and how to operate in it. They have the capability to do a thing like that. He keeps getting asked about anti-skills agents that have utility denial. He says that makes sense. It might be something that is for later in the game. Now, this is something that Morello said in the HITSCAN interview that I found pretty revealing, stating that the current 11 agents are very conservative for them right now, which is to say, this is possibly the most basic version of Valorant, or least complex, that we're going to have ever. The intention of this was so that when you're transferring from other games like CSGO or Overwatch or whatever, you can focus more on the fundamentals of the game with the gunplay and getting to grips with how many different abilities exist. And he goes on to give an example that a design like Reyna, which I think I would describe a bit more MOBA-esque, is more the direction they're going to go. So I think we can expect new agents to really push the boundaries of what we expect in attack shooter. As Morello has said in other live streams, that as time goes on, they want to separate the gameplay of Valorant and CSGO more and more, where we're not going to think of things in the context of the very sharp limits that Counter-Strike has, and instead realize that this is a Riot game where crazy pop-off things happen and abilities are going to get out of control, I think. Luckily, Reyna isn't being showed to be overpowered, a very pub-stompy agent, but I would say if you know how to counter her, she actually falls off really quick. In fact, so much so that I think she's going to be dropped from pro play entirely very soon. Her pick rate has already been plummeting, which perhaps some of these tactics we need to make more specific guides on why higher level players don't find Reyna oppressive. So be sure to be on the lookout for that in future videos. Hit the bell icon to actually get notified when those videos go live. Moving on though, Morello talks more about the meta and balance changes, or perhaps right now the lack thereof, because with the new patch we only got the Viper buffs, nothing else really other than some interactions, and perhaps the smokes and tagging changes shifts things a bit, but overall the agents weren't tuned too much here. Morello goes further to explain their philosophy in approaching the balanced state of the game, noting that power creep is a huge problem in League of Legends, massive in Overwatch. Wow, you don't say. Every time I've brought it up in Overwatch, I've been told it's a figment of my imagination. But anyway, moving on. The way that they're going about to try to deal with it is by trying to keep agents core to a main identity and then splashing on extra abilities onto that. So for example, a character like Brimstone is the best burst sight executor, whereas Sage is the best staller. Each one of them has other elements that get splashed in, and based on what he's saying, I would imagine that those core identities that they state as a design goal will continue to be their main strength, and they'll more so rein in the other strengths. So for example, one thing that they're looking at is Brimstone's smoke duration, where if they reduce a bit would make him less strong at stalling, but either way, no matter how long those smokes last, he'll still be the best at dropping multiple smokes on the same point in a burst execute. So that identity will never change, and they'll never make an agent that infringes on that part, although there will be ability overlap elsewhere, which allows them to have agents be more fluid in that way, rather than as opposed to a game like Overwatch where they kind of struggle to make new characters because all of them have to be so unique. And sometimes that leads to adverse gameplay side effects. I won't get into it. I'm sure you already know. Overall, with the balance changes of the game, they're going to be looking to ease into changes bit by bit and slightly push up or push down characters as need be. Viper's buffs that are coming through in the 1.02 patch are an example of this, where they're buffing her to have more applied uses, but kind of still might suspect that she won't be the strongest agent all of a sudden, but they'd rather ease into that rather than have explosive buffs that just totally rework the metagame. Morello actually had a very interesting explanation of the intended use of Viper, which I think both explains their thought process on the character and a very important distinction to realize, where the value of being able to redeploy your smokes and have a resource that regenerates is that over the course of a long round where a lot of utility is exchanged back and forth, and maybe you're faking an execute but don't commit, the enemy tosses their utilities, mollies, slows, whatever at you, you don't commit, draw that out, and then change where you're going, then the value of Viper starts to get a lot better. And the way Morello explains it, and I think he's correct in this, the meta and the way it's playing out right now, most of the time you're burst executing or playing fast, where you get contact, slam your abilities in, rush in together. And if you're doing that, well, is Viper any different than the other offerings if it's just a set one and done type exchange? Well, no, that's not what she's designed to do. So when we start to see a meta, if we ever do, that splits up a lot more and there's a lot more poking and prodding and solo play, then that long-term value effect of being able to redeploy your smokes multiple times through the round will drain the resources of the enemy. My suspicion is we won't see that for quite a long time, actually, because I'm realizing more and more that Valorant requires far more teamwork with the abilities and combos than I originally thought. I assumed there'd be a bit of it, but the sequencing of how to ideally maximize your abilities requires almost Overwatch-esque combos, which goes as a given in that game, but I think comes as a bit of a surprise in the TAC shooter environment, because individually the characters' powers aren't much better than smokes and flashes in CSGO. In fact, I'd say it's the opposite, where CSGO smokes and flashes are very impactful and everybody's got them. In Valorant, you got to be a bit more clever and have a bit more coordination on where you apply each thing, because each one typically has a very specific part of the map it's good at, so you need your teammates to help cover the other parts for you to get anywhere. With that being the case, I doubt we're going to see a meta where splitting up most of the time is good. It still happens sometimes in pro play, splitting for defaults, waiting for pushes, etc. But a big percentage of the rounds are these bigger burst executes. So we'll see how that develops. All it takes is one team to start dominating with a different style of play to change everybody's mind. But for now, at least, I think that's how it's going to pan out. Further discussion about Viper, Morello says that he doesn't want the ultimate to have a fast animation because he doesn't want it used in combat. And that phrase I think is very important when the devs say in combat, because it's a bit unclear sometimes when they say they don't want abilities to replace combat, taking context of things he said in other cases, specifically of an agent like RAZE. The devs don't mind you being able to do a lot of damage or even get pickoffs or kills with abilities, as long as it's pre-combat, right? Like when RAZE clears an angle with a boombot or a nade, it's not instead of a gunfight, it's using it tactically to clear that spot and to punish that position. You don't really want to peek a corner with a nade in your hand. Best case scenario, you trade 1-for-1, and that's not very good. So in that same way, very few cases is there an ability that you use in response to a gunfight, other than like jet dash or something to get you out. So Viper being slow with her ult is going to stay. He also goes on to say that he thinks Viper ult is very strong. And this is a point that I have a major disagreement. So much so I might even make a separate video about it. I've been compiling evidence of Viper's ult being hilariously easy to counter. I think it's something that at lower levels feels like this big imposing force that dominates a section of the map, but at higher levels, it instead just reveals exactly where Viper is and cuts off her ability to have any map control outside of that zone, cuts off her team, and makes her actually pretty easy to get rushed down and traded out. Look out for a dedicated video talking about that more in depth, where I can break down the examples I've collected on that subject. Last bits for the video though, few community shout outs. There's a good chance you've already seen some of Flight's videos. He's been going viral showing off his insane RAZE movement. Well, in this one, he has an advanced RAZE satchel boost tutorial that breaks down the different styles of jumps you can make. It, along with everything else, is always linked in the description for you to watch it in full, but the TLDR of it is that there's 3 ways to time your first satchel, and depending on where you are on the detonation, if you just flat jump on it, you'll get more height. If you're closer to the ground, you'll get more distance. And if you're sort of in between, you'll get a good arc. The second satchel is harder to hit because you're exploding it midair on yourself. You want to wait a bit so that you can get more distance oftentimes, but not too long so that you miss it. And the craziness of this is that you even can get a third jump by wasting your rocket launcher, basically, to not kill, but to turn around and use its momentum to propel you even further. To get a triple jump out of this is just insane stuff. Other fun stuff for the video, I wanted to shout out 7Bs, who makes these amazing lifelike illustrations. It's one of Jett as well as Viper, and both of them are just shocking in how detailed they are. You can check out 7B's Patreon if you want to support the artist directly. Keybinds88 on Reddit shares this acrylic painting of Cypher, which is just, I think this looks absolutely perfect. Something that I wish I could hang on my wall. It's a player who does frequent the Trap Master character. And last up, Spearmaster on Twitter made a RAZE bazooka. I mean, this thing looks exactly like it does in the game. Holy smokes. It looks like he's ready to unleash havoc onto Tracer in the back, letting out some frustrations pent up from Overwatch, it seems. Overwatch has Nerf guns, but I think this one would be pretty cool if it was made into a real one as well. Really cool stuff. Hey, if you guys find anything that you want us to cover in news roundups, be sure to send us links on Twitter at ClickheadsYT. Hit us a follow on there. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave it with a like before you head out, and don't forget to hit subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you actually get notified when our other videos come live. We got lots in the works, don't miss out. Otherwise, that's been it for me. I've been Frito for Clickheads. We'll see you guys next time.